Thanksgiving dinner smelled like rosemary, burnt edges, and the kind of silence that builds between fork scrapes on porcelain. The dining room felt smaller than usual, compressed by the weight of my mother's disapproving glances and my fiancé's careful politeness. Daniel sat across from me, his prosecutor's posture straight-backed even at my family table, while my mother, Patricia, carved the turkey with surgical precision. I'd love to know which corner of the globe you're watching from. And if this story speaks to you, make sure to subscribe. Tomorrow's video is one you absolutely can't miss. More wine, Daniel? She asked, her voice carrying that particular sweetness she reserved for people she was about to dissect. I'm good, thank you, Mrs. Caldwell. Daniel's smile was practiced, professional, the same one he probably used in courtrooms when he needed to appear trustworthy. He reached for my hand under the table, and I squeezed back, grateful for the anchor. My younger sister Maya rolled her eyes from her end of the table. Mom, stop acting like you're hosting the Supreme Court. It's just Daniel. It's not just anything, Patricia replied, setting down the carving knife with a deliberate clink. When your sister brings home the district attorney's star prosecutor, we show proper respect. I felt my cheeks warm. Mom, he's not. Actually, I got promoted last month, Daniel interrupted gently. Senior prosecutor now, though I don't think that changes anything about dinner. Patricia's eyes lit up like she'd struck oil. Senior prosecutor, how wonderful. And so young, too. What are you, 32? 34, Daniel corrected, taking a sip of water. I could see him processing the conversation, filing away details the way he did with witness testimonies. Even better. Experience matters in your line of work, doesn't it? All those criminals you've put away. She said criminals, like she was tasting something bitter. Maya caught my eye and made a subtle gagging motion. I bit back a laugh. I prefer to think of it as seeking justice for victims, Daniel said diplomatically. Though yes, it does require dealing with people who've made poor choices. Poor choices. The phrase hung in the air like smoke. I shifted in my seat, suddenly aware of how the conversation was tiptoeing around something I couldn't quite identify. Speaking of which, Patricia continued, serving herself a generous portion of stuffing, I imagine you must do thorough background checks on people in your personal life. Security clearances, that sort of thing. The fork in my hand felt heavier. Mom, what are you getting at? Nothing, sweetheart. I'm just curious about the process. How does someone in Daniel's position vet the people they trust? Daniel looked puzzled. Well, there's no formal process for personal relationships. I mean, we're encouraged to report any conflicts of interest, but... Conflicts of interest, Patricia repeated, nodding sagely. Like if someone you were close to had, say, a history with the legal system? My stomach dropped. Maya stopped mid-chew, sensing the shift in atmosphere. Mom, I said, my voice sharper than intended. Stop. But Patricia was just getting started. She had that look in her eyes, the same one she'd worn when she'd told my high school boyfriend's parents about my detention record, or when she'd called my college roommate's mother about the party we'd thrown. It was the look of someone who believed they were doing the right thing, consequences be damned. I just think honesty is important in a relationship, she said, reaching for her wine glass. Don't you agree, Daniel? Of course, he replied, but his prosecutor instincts were clearly kicking in. I could see him scanning the table, reading micro-expressions, looking for the trap he sensed was being set. So if, hypothetically, someone had kept important information from you, information that might affect your career, your reputation, you'd want to know, wouldn't you? Mom, stop it right now. I stood up, my chair scraping against the hardwood floor. Whatever you think you're doing. Sit down, Amanda. Her voice was steel wrapped in velvet. I'm just having a conversation with your fiancé. Daniel's hand found mine again, but this time it felt different, uncertain. Mrs. Caldwell, if there's something specific you want to discuss. There is, actually. Patricia set down her wine glass with theatrical precision. Did you know that your fiancé has a criminal record? The words hit the room like a physical force. Maya's fork clattered to her plate. Daniel's hand was still in mine. The grandfather clock in the corner seemed to tick louder, marking the seconds as they stretched into infinity. That's not. I started, but my throat felt like it was closing. Arrested in 2019, Patricia continued, her voice gaining momentum. Charged with breaking and entering, destruction of property, and theft. Quite a list for someone who works at a nonprofit and volunteers at the animal shelter. Daniel turned to look at me, and I saw something I'd never seen in his eyes before. Not anger, not disappointment, but something worse. Professional assessment. He was looking at me the way he looked at defendants. Amanda? His voice was quiet, careful. It's not what it sounds like, I whispered, but even as I said it, I realized how hollow the words were. How many times had he heard those exact words across a courtroom? 4 years ago, Patricia pressed on, oblivious to or perhaps energized by the destruction she was causing. Felony charges. Daniel, surely you remember the case. Young woman breaks into her ex-boyfriend's apartment, destroys his television and computer, steals his grandmother's jewelry. The color drained from Daniel's face. His hand slowly pulled away from mine. The Morrison case, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. You remember. Patricia clapped her hands together as if she'd solved a particularly challenging crossword puzzle. I thought you might. It was quite the story in the local paper. Local woman's crime spree ends in arrest. I wanted to disappear. To sink through the floor and emerge somewhere far away, where the weight of old mistakes couldn't follow me. But Daniel was staring at me with a look I couldn't decipher, and I knew I had to say something. I was going to tell you, I managed. Were you? His prosecutor voice was emerging, measured and controlled. When? Before or after the wedding? It's complicated. Complicated how? He was fully in attorney mode now, leaning back in his chair, creating distance. You broke into Marcus Morrison's apartment. You destroyed $15,000 worth of electronics. You stole a necklace worth $3,000. Those are facts, not complications. Maya finally found her voice. Danielle, maybe you should let her explain. Explain what? Patricia interrupted. That she lied to him for 3 years? That she let him propose without telling him he was engaged to a convicted felon? I'm not a convicted felon, I said sharply. The charges were dropped. The moment the words left my mouth, I realized my mistake. Daniel's face went white, then red, then white again. Dropped, he repeated slowly. By whom? I couldn't answer. Couldn't breathe. Couldn't think of anything except the way he was looking at me like I was a stranger. By you, Patricia said helpfully. Isn't that right, Daniel? You were the prosecutor who dropped the charges against my daughter. The silence that followed was deafening. Daniel stood up so abruptly his chair nearly toppled over. I need some air, he said, his voice hollow. Daniel, wait. I reached for him, but he was already walking away. Let him go, Patricia said, refilling her wine glass. He needs time to process this. Process what? I spun around to face her. Process the fact that you just destroyed my relationship? I didn't destroy anything, Amanda. I revealed the truth. There's a difference. No, there isn't. Not in this case. My hands were shaking. Do you have any idea what you've done? Maya stood up, moving to my side. Mom, that was seriously messed up. It was necessary, Patricia replied calmly. That man deserves to know who he's marrying. And frankly, I'm appalled that you kept this from him. You don't understand. I understand perfectly. You committed serious crimes, Amanda. Felonies. And then you lied about it to someone whose entire career is built on putting people who do exactly what you did behind bars. I felt tears threatening, but I forced them back. It wasn't like that. A lot of love and effort went into bringing this story to life. If you're enjoying it, we'd be so grateful if you'd subscribe to our channel. Now back to where we left off. Then what was it like? Patricia's voice rose. Enlighten me. Tell me how breaking into someone's home and stealing from them isn't exactly what it appears to be. The front door slammed. Daniel was gone. I looked around the dining room, at the carefully set table with its autumn centerpiece and good china, at Maya's sympathetic face and Patricia's righteous expression. Everything looked the same as it had an hour ago, but it felt like a completely different universe. He was the prosecutor on my case, I said quietly. Do you understand what that means? Patricia shrugged. It means he'll understand the legal implications better than most. No, Mom. It means he made the decision to drop the charges. He looked at my case, at what I did, at who I was, and he decided I deserved a second chance. For the first time, Patricia looked uncertain. Well, that's good, isn't it? And I never told him it was me. The words felt like glass in my throat. For 3 years, I've been with him, and he has no idea that Amanda Caldwell, his fiancée, is the same person as Amanda Catherine Caldwell, case number 2019 to 4587. Maya's eyes widened. Oh, shit! Language, Patricia said automatically, but her heart wasn't in it. Don't you see? I continued. He's not just finding out that I have a criminal record. He's finding out that I'm a case he handled. A case he probably remembers. A case where he made a professional decision that now affects his personal life. The implications were starting to dawn on Patricia's face. But the charges were dropped. That means he believed I deserved a second chance based on the evidence and circumstances. But it also means he made a professional judgment call that he now has to reconcile with his personal feelings. Do you think he's going to wonder if he made the right decision? Do you think he's going to question his own judgment? Patricia was quiet now, picking at her napkin. And worse, I continued, my voice gaining strength, he's going to wonder if I sought him out on purpose, if I somehow engineered our meeting, if our entire relationship is built on me manipulating the prosecutor who let me walk free. Is it? Patricia asked quietly. No, the word exploded out of me. I had no idea who he was when we met. I didn't even remember his name from the case. It was 4 years ago, and I was in the worst place of my life. I barely remember anything about that time except wanting to disappear. Quote, Maya reached for my hand. So it's just a coincidence? The worst possible coincidence. I sank back into my chair. And now he's out there wondering if the woman he loves played him for 3 years. The weight of it all was crushing. Daniel wasn't just hurt or angry about the deception. He was probably questioning everything. His professional judgment, his personal instincts, the foundation of our entire relationship. Patricia was staring at her plate, the triumph gone out of her expression. I thought I was helping. Helping how? I asked. By ambushing us both at Thanksgiving dinner? You should have told him yourself. I know that. The words came out harsher than I intended. I know I should have told him. I've been trying to figure out how for months. But there's no good way to tell someone you love that you're the criminal they once showed mercy to. Maya was looking between Patricia and me like she was watching a tennis match. So what happens now? I looked toward the front door, knowing Daniel was somewhere out there processing the fact that his fiancée was a case file in his memory. Somewhere out there, the man I loved was probably wondering if everything we'd built together was real or just an elaborate con. Now I have to figure out how to explain 4 years of my life to someone who already knows the worst parts of it, I said. And I have to hope that the man who gave Amanda Catherine Caldwell a second chance 4 years ago is willing to give Amanda Caldwell another one today. But as I sat there in the wreckage of what was supposed to be a family dinner, I couldn't shake the feeling that some chances only come once. And I might have just lost mine. I found Daniel sitting in his car in my driveway, engine off, hands gripping the steering wheel like it was the only thing keeping him tethered to reality. The November air bit through my sweater as I approached, my breath forming small clouds that disappeared as quickly as they formed. He didn't look at me when I tapped on the passenger window, but he unlocked the door. Can we talk? I asked, sliding into the seat beside him. I don't know what to say to you right now. His voice was steady, but his knuckles were white against the steering wheel. I keep running through the case in my head, trying to remember details. What do you remember? He was quiet for a long moment, staring through the windshield at my mother's meticulously maintained front yard. Young woman, early 20s. Broke into her ex-boyfriend's apartment while he was at work. Destroyed his gaming setup, his laptop. I took a family heirloom necklace. Each word felt like a small cut. That's the basic outline. The defense attorney argued it was a crime of passion. Recent breakup, emotional distress, first offense. He finally turned to look at me. I remember thinking she seemed more broken than dangerous. I was broken. Were you? There was something sharp in his voice now. Or were you calculating enough to research the prosecutor who might have mercy on you? The accusation hit me like cold water. You think I planned this? You think I somehow orchestrated meeting you? I don't know what to think, Amanda. 3 years. 3 years we've been together, and you never thought to mention that I held your fate in my hands once? It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? He shifted in his seat to face me fully. Walk me through it. How does someone forget that the man she's about to marry once decided whether or not to send her to prison? I took a shaky breath. Because when I met you, I wasn't Amanda Catherine Caldwell anymore. I was just Amanda. I'd spent 2 years trying to become someone different, someone better. The night we met at Sarah's birthday party, I wasn't thinking about court cases or prosecutors. I was thinking about how you made me laugh. Sarah's party. He was processing, filing information. 2 years after the case. 2 years and 3 months. And you didn't recognize me? Would you recognize a defendant from a case you handled 2 years earlier, especially one who looked completely different? He considered this. You look different? I had long brown hair then. I was about 30 pounds heavier. I wore glasses. I struggled for the right words. I was a different person in every way that mattered. Daniel was quiet, and I could practically hear the gears turning in his prosecutor's mind. Tell me about the case, from your perspective. Do you really want to hear this? I need to hear this. I closed my eyes, letting myself remember that awful time. Marcus and I had been together for 2 years. We lived together, talked about marriage, then I found out he'd been cheating on me with his coworker for 6 months. That doesn't justify. I'm not justifying it. I opened my eyes, meeting his gaze. I'm explaining it. I confronted him and he laughed. Actually, I laughed. Said I was bored, that he'd been planning to leave me anyway, and that I should be grateful he found someone else so I didn't have to be alone forever. Daniel's expression softened slightly, but he didn't interrupt. He kicked me out that same day, told me I had 2 hours to get my stuff and leave my key. But when I got there with Maya to pack, half my belongings were gone. Books I'd bought, clothes I'd left there, even my grandmother's jewelry that I'd stored in his bedroom. So you went back. A week later, I'd called him every day asking for my things back, and he kept saying he'd thrown them away. I didn't believe him. I thought maybe if I could just get my grandmother's necklace back, I could start over. How did you get in? I still had a garage door opener in my car. He'd never asked for it back. I felt the familiar shame creeping up my throat. I waited until I knew he'd be at work. I just wanted to find my things and leave. But you destroyed his property. I found my grandmother's necklace in a jewelry box with other women's things. Earrings, bracelets, all from different women. There were photos, too. Pictures of him with other women in our bed. In the places we used to go together. I realized I wasn't the first one he'd cheated on, and I probably wouldn't be the last. Daniel was watching me carefully. So you destroyed his electronics. I lost it. I completely lost it. I saw his computer was open to a dating profile where he'd posted pictures of himself in the apartment we'd shared, calling it his place. I put my fist through the monitor. And the gaming system? I threw it. I was so angry, so hurt. I kept thinking about all the nights he'd ignored me to play those games, and now I knew it was because he was already planning his exit strategy. Amanda. His voice was gentler now. You could have gone to prison. I know. Tears were threatening again. When the police came, I didn't even try to run. I just sat on the floor next to the broken glass and waited for them to arrest me. The report said you were cooperative. I was cooperative because I knew I deserved whatever happened to me. I'd done something terrible, and I was ready to face the consequences. We sat in silence for a moment. A neighbor walked by with their dog, waving cheerfully. Normal life continued around us while our world fell apart. Why did you drop the charges? I asked quietly. Daniel rubbed his face with both hands. Several reasons. Your ex-boyfriend was difficult. He kept changing his story about what was stolen. First he said you took jewelry worth $3,000, then he couldn't provide documentation for the value. His insurance claim didn't match his police report. What do you mean? He claimed you destroyed a $15,000 gaming setup and computer, but when we investigated, most of the equipment was old and had been replaced under warranty multiple times. The actual value was maybe $3,000, and some of the damage looked like it had happened over time. I stared at him. I didn't know that. Your defense attorney did. She was good. She presented character witnesses, evidence of your volunteer work, documentation of your mental state following the breakup. But what really convinced me was the victim himself. Marcus convinced you to drop the charges? Marcus convinced me he wasn't entirely truthful about what happened. During our final interview, he slipped up and mentioned that he'd been planning to file an insurance claim anyway because some of the equipment was, quote, getting old. It became clear he saw your breakdown as an opportunity to upgrade his electronics at your expense. The revelation hit me like a physical blow, so it wasn't mercy. It was justice. It was both. Daniel turned to look at me directly. You committed crimes, Amanda. Real crimes that hurt someone and damaged property. But the circumstances were complicated. And the victim wasn't entirely innocent. You were a first-time offender who was clearly in crisis, and the punishment didn't fit the actual crime. But you still could have prosecuted. I could have. Maybe I should have. But I believed you when you said it would never happen again. It hasn't. I know. He was quiet for a moment. That's what makes this so complicated. What do you mean? I mean that I made the right professional decision 4 years ago. The Amanda Catherine Caldwell who sat in that courtroom needed help, not prison. But the Amanda Caldwell I'm engaged to, I don't know who she is anymore. The words cut deep. I'm the same person. Are you? Because the woman I fell in love with would never lie to me for 3 years. She would never let me propose without telling me we had a history together. I wasn't lying. I was protecting us both. From what? From this. I gestured between us. From you questioning everything we've built together. From you wondering if I manipulated you somehow. From you looking at me the way you're looking at me right now, like I'm a case study instead of the woman you love. Daniel was quiet for a long time. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Do you know what the worst part is? What? I remember liking you. My heart stopped. What? Not romantically. But there was something about you in that courtroom. You didn't make excuses. You didn't try to minimize what you'd done. You just sat there and accepted responsibility. And I could see how much you regretted it. I remember thinking that whatever punishment you got, you'd already been punishing yourself worse. Tears were falling now, and I didn't try to stop them. Daniel, I recommended community service and anger management counseling. Did you complete them? Yes, all of it. And I went to therapy for 2 years after that. Good. He started the car. I need some time to think. Where are you going? My apartment. I need to pull the case file. You're going to review my case? I need to remember everything, every detail, every conversation, every piece of evidence. I need to understand what happened 4 years ago before I can understand what's happening now. I felt panic rising in my chest. Please don't go. Amanda, I love you, but right now I need to figure out if the person I love is real or if she's just a better version of someone I once prosecuted. She's real. I'm real. Then you won't mind if I verify that. He put the car in reverse. I'll call you when I'm ready to talk. I got out of the car and watched him drive away. Back inside, Maya was washing dishes while Patricia sat at the kitchen table, looking shell-shocked. Where did he go? Maya asked. To review my case file. Patricia looked up. What does that mean? It means he's going to read every police report, every witness statement, every piece of evidence from the worst period of my life. He's going to analyze it like he would any other case, looking for inconsistencies or patterns. Maybe that's good, Maya said carefully. Maybe when he sees the whole picture, he'll see that I was a mess who made terrible choices and then lied to him about it for 3 years. Or he'll see that you were someone who made mistakes, learned from them, and became a better person. Would you want to marry someone whose biggest character growth happened after they broke into someone's house? Maya dried her hands and sat down beside me. I'd want to marry someone who was honest about their mistakes and showed me they'd changed. But I wasn't honest. No, you weren't. But maybe there's still time to be. Patricia cleared her throat. I need to apologize. Maya and I both turned to look at her. I was wrong to bring this up the way I did. I thought I was protecting Daniel from marrying someone with secrets. But I see now that I was protecting my own peace of mind more than anyone else's happiness. Why, Mom? Why couldn't you just let us be happy? Patricia was quiet for a moment, staring at her hands. Because I was afraid that if he found out later, he'd blame us for not telling him. I was afraid he'd think our whole family was dishonest. So you destroyed our relationship to protect your reputation? I destroyed your relationship because I'm a coward who was too afraid to have an uncomfortable conversation with you about having an uncomfortable conversation with him. It was the most honest thing my mother had said in years. The question now, Maya said, is what are you going to do about it? I thought about Daniel, alone in his apartment, reading police reports and witness statements, trying to reconcile the broken woman from 4 years ago with the woman he'd planned to marry. I thought about him analyzing our relationship like evidence, looking for clues that I'd been deceiving him from the beginning. I'm going to tell him everything, I said finally, not just about the case, but about everything that happened after, about the therapy, the community service, the years I spent trying to forgive myself, about how meeting him wasn't part of some elaborate plan, but the moment I realized I might actually deserve to be happy again. And if he doesn't believe you? I wiped my eyes with the back of my hand. Then at least I'll know I finally told him the truth. But even as I said it, I couldn't shake the feeling that the truth might not be enough. Some bridges, once burned, can't be rebuilt with good intentions and belated honesty. And I was about to find out if ours was one of them. The next morning came too early and not soon enough. I'd spent the night alternating between staring at the ceiling and checking my phone for messages that never came. By 6 a.m., I gave up on sleep and drove to the animal shelter where I volunteered, hoping that the routine of caring for abandoned creatures might quiet the chaos in my head. Sarah Martinez, the shelter manager, found me in the cat room at 7:30, methodically cleaning litter boxes with the intensity of someone trying to scrub away larger problems. "You're here early," she said, settling cross-legged on the floor as an orange tabby immediately claimed her lap, "and you look like hell." "Thanks. That's exactly what I needed to hear." "What happened?" Sarah had been my friend since college, one of the few people who knew about my past and had never made me feel ashamed of it. "Is this about Daniel?" I told her everything while we fed the morning crowd of strays and surrendered. Sarah listened without interruption, occasionally making sympathetic noises when cats rubbed against her legs, demanding attention. "So he's reviewing your case file," she said finally, "like you're a suspect." "Like I am a suspect. Because technically I am. You were a suspect. 4 years ago, the charges were dropped, Amanda. You're not guilty of anything except poor timing in the honesty department. Tell that to Daniel." Sarah stood up, brushing cat hair off her jeans. "Maybe I will." "What do you mean?" "I mean, maybe it's time someone reminded him that he's not just a prosecutor right now. He's someone's fiancé, and that someone deserves better than being treated like a case study." Before I could argue, my phone buzzed. Daniel's name on the screen made my stomach lurch. "Can you meet me at the courthouse? I want to show you something." "Are you asking me or summoning me for questioning?" There was a long pause. "I'm asking you, Amanda, please." 30 minutes later, I found myself walking through the marble corridors of the county courthouse, my footsteps echoing in the early morning emptiness. Daniel was waiting outside courtroom B, holding a manila folder that looked disturbingly thick. "Thank you for coming," he said, his voice formal and distant. "This is where you prosecuted me, isn't it?" "Yes." He pushed open the heavy wooden doors. "I thought maybe if we were here, in this space, we could get past the emotion and focus on the facts." The courtroom was empty except for us, morning sunlight streaming through tall windows and illuminating dust motes dancing in the air. Daniel led me to a table in the gallery, spreading out papers like he was preparing for trial. "I spent all night going through everything," he said. "Police reports, witness statements, evidence photos, character references. I wanted to make sure I wasn't misremembering anything." I sat down reluctantly, and I found some things that surprised me. He pulled out a photograph, sliding it across the table. "Do you remember this?" It was a picture of Marcus's apartment after my breakdown. The destroyed electronics, the broken glass, the overturned furniture. But what caught my attention was something I'd forgotten. Scattered among the wreckage were my belongings. My books, my clothes, my photograph of my grandmother. He had thrown away my things, I said quietly. No, he hadn't. According to the police report, they found most of your personal items in a garbage bag in his bedroom closet. Unworn clothes, books in perfect condition, jewelry that belonged to you. I stared at the photograph. I didn't know that. Your defense attorney did. She used it to argue that your actions were motivated by the discovery that he'd been lying to you about disposing of your property. Daniel pulled out another document. But here's what's interesting. In his initial statement, Marcus claimed you broke in to steal from him, but when pressed for details about what you allegedly stole, he kept changing his story. You mentioned that yesterday. Right, but I didn't mention this. He showed me a transcript. During his second interview, when asked to describe the necklace you supposedly stole, he couldn't remember basic details. Gold or silver, long or short chain, pendant or no pendant. But you could describe it perfectly, down to the inscription on the back. Because it was my grandmother's. Exactly. And when we contacted your family to verify your story, your sister provided photographs of you wearing that necklace at family events dating back years. I looked at Maya's statement, her careful handwriting describing how our grandmother had given me the necklace for my 18th birthday, how I'd worn it to every important occasion since then. The case against you was always shaky, Daniel continued. Your ex-boyfriend was an unreliable witness with clear motives to exaggerate damages. The physical evidence supported your version of events more than his, and your character references were extraordinary. He spread out letters from former professors, volunteer coordinators, even my high school counselor. I'd forgotten about most of them. Dr. Elizabeth Chen from the university psychology department wrote a 3-page letter detailing your work with her research on domestic violence survivors. She called you one of the most empathetic and dedicated students I've ever supervised. I worked with her for 2 semesters. Your volunteer coordinator at the homeless shelter wrote that you donated over 300 hours of your time in the year before your arrest, often staying late to help with intake paperwork and client counseling. I liked helping people. Your boss at the nonprofit where you worked part-time said you frequently used your own money to buy supplies for programs when the budget ran short. I felt tears threatening. Daniel, why are you telling me this? Because I want you to understand something. He leaned forward, his voice intense. When I decided to drop those charges, it wasn't mercy, it wasn't even justice. It was common sense. You were clearly a good person who'd had a terrible day and made a terrible decision. The punishment didn't fit the crime, and more importantly, it didn't fit the person. So why are you treating me like a criminal now? Because the woman described in these character references wouldn't lie to someone she loved for 3 years. The words hit like a slap. Maybe that woman learned that honesty doesn't always protect the people you care about. Or maybe, Daniel said, closing the folder, that woman learned that secrets are easier than trust. We sat in silence for a moment, the weight of years and mistakes and misunderstandings filling the space between us. I found something else, he said finally, pulling out a single sheet of paper. Your victim impact statement. My what? During sentencing, defendants are sometimes given the opportunity to address their victims directly. You wrote a letter to Marcus. I stared at the paper, not recognizing my own handwriting at first. Then the words came flooding back. I remember writing this. My lawyer said it might help. Read it. I took the paper with shaking hands. My own words, written in the aftermath of the worst decision I'd ever made. Marcus, I know that nothing I can say will undo what I did to your home and your possessions. I know that my actions were wrong, regardless of how hurt and angry I was. You didn't deserve to have your space violated or your property destroyed, and I take full responsibility for my choices that day. I've spent every day since my arrest thinking about the person I became in those moments, and I'm horrified by her. She's not who I want to be, and she's not who I was raised to be. I can't take back what I did, but I can promise you that I will spend the rest of my life making sure I never become that person again. I'm getting help. I'm learning better ways to handle anger and disappointment. I'm working to rebuild the parts of myself that I lost somewhere along the way, not because a court ordered me to, but because I need to believe that good people can do terrible things and still find their way back to being good. I hope someday you can forgive me. More than that, I hope someday I can forgive myself and prove that this worst moment doesn't define who I really am. Sincerely, Amanda Catherine Caldwell. By the time I finished reading, tears were falling onto the paper. You never sent it, Daniel said quietly. My lawyer advised against it. Said it could be seen as an admission of guilt that might hurt my case. But you wrote it anyway. I needed to say it, even if no one ever heard it. Daniel was quiet for a long moment, studying my face. The woman who wrote that letter is the same woman I fell in love with. Honest, accountable, determined to be better. Then why does it feel like you're trying to prove I'm someone else? Because I'm trying to figure out how that woman became someone who could lie to me for 3 years. The accusation hung between us like a physical barrier. I didn't lie to you, Daniel. I just didn't tell you everything. That's the same thing. Is it? Can you tell me about every case you've ever prosecuted? Every defendant you've sent to prison or let walk free? That's different. Those are professional confidences. And this was personal shame. Shame about what? About making a mistake and learning from it? About getting help and becoming a better person? Shame about being someone you once prosecuted. The words exploded out of me. Shame about being the kind of person who destroys other people's property when she's angry. Shame about being weak enough to let a cheating boyfriend drive me to criminal behavior. Daniel stared at me. Is that really how you see yourself? It's how I saw myself for years, and it's how I was afraid you'd see me if you knew. So you decided to make that choice for me. I decided to protect us both from a truth that could destroy what we'd built together. By building it on a lie. Quote, by building it on who I became, not who I used to be. Daniel gathered up the papers, sliding them back into the folder. I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest. Okay. Did you know who I was when we met, even subconsciously? The question I'd been dreading. No, I swear to you, I had no idea. How can you be sure? Because if I'd known you were the prosecutor who dropped my charges, I would have run in the opposite direction. I would never have put you in this position. What position? The position of having to choose between your professional ethics and your personal feelings. The position of wondering if every decision you made about my case was compromised by feelings you didn't even know you had yet. Daniel's face went pale. What do you mean? I mean that now you have to live with the knowledge that the woman you love is someone whose fate you once held in your hands. You have to wonder if your decision to drop those charges was influenced by some subconscious attraction or connection you don't remember. You have to question your own professional judgment. That's not. Yes, it is, and that's why I couldn't tell you. Because the moment you knew, everything would become complicated in ways that couldn't be uncomplicated. Daniel stood up abruptly, pacing to the window. Do you know what the worst part is? What? I keep going back through my memories of that case, looking for signs that I was somehow compromised. Looking for evidence that I made the wrong decision for the wrong reasons. And I can't find any. Every instinct I had about you, every professional judgment I made was correct. You were exactly who I thought you were, someone who needed help, not punishment. Then what's the problem? He turned to face me. The problem is that I don't trust my instincts anymore. If I could fall in love with someone and not recognize them as a former defendant, what else am I missing? What other blind spots do I have? The courthouse felt colder suddenly, the morning light less warm. Daniel, you made the right decision 4 years ago, and you made the right decision when you fell in love with me. Those aren't connected. Aren't they? He walked back to the table, gathering his papers. I need more time to think. How much time? I don't know. What does that mean for us? He paused at the courtroom door. I don't know that either. Quote. After he left, I sat alone in the empty courtroom where my fate had once been decided, surrounded by the ghosts of who I used to be and the uncertainty of who I might become. The morning sun had shifted, casting long shadows across the floor, and I realized that some discoveries change everything, even when they confirm what you already knew to be true. The investigation into my past was just beginning, and I had the sinking feeling that before it was over, we'd uncover truths that neither of us was prepared to face. 3 days passed without a word from Daniel. 3 days of me checking my phone obsessively, starting conversations I never finished, and pretending to eat food that tasted like cardboard. Maya had taken to calling me twice daily, and even Patricia had attempted what she probably considered subtle check-ins, though her version of subtlety involved showing up at my apartment with groceries I hadn't asked for. On Thursday evening, I was folding laundry with the mechanical precision of someone trying not to think when my doorbell rang. Through the peephole, I saw a woman I didn't recognize, mid-50s, professional attire, carrying a briefcase that screamed lawyer. "Amanda Caldwell?" she asked when I opened the door. "Yes." "My name is Jennifer Walsh. I was your defense attorney 4 years ago." My stomach dropped. "I remember you." "May I come in? I think we need to talk." I led her to my living room, where she settled into my armchair with the confidence of someone accustomed to difficult conversations. "Daniel Martinez contacted me yesterday," she said without preamble. "He wanted to discuss your case." What? "Apparently, he's conducting his own investigation into the circumstances surrounding the charges against you. He asked if I would be willing to meet with him and share my perspective on your defense." I sank onto my couch. "Did you?" "I told him I'd need to speak with you first. Attorney-client privilege doesn't expire just because time has passed." Jennifer leaned forward. "Amanda, what's going on? Why is the prosecutor who dropped your charges 4 years ago suddenly interested in revisiting your case?" I explained everything, watching Jennifer's expression shift from confusion to understanding to something that looked like concern. "So you're engaged to Daniel Martinez," she said slowly, "and you never told him about your case." I didn't know he was the prosecutor until my mother brought it up. Quote, "But once you realized who he was, you still didn't tell him." I was scared. Jennifer was quiet for a moment, studying me with the same intensity she'd probably used in courtrooms. "Amanda, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me." "Okay. When you met Daniel, did you know who he was? Even subconsciously?" Everyone keeps asking me that. Because it's important. If there's any possibility that you sought him out because of your connection to your case. I didn't. The words came out sharper than I intended. I met him at a friend's party. We talked about books and movies and the terrible music the DJ was playing. I had no idea he was a prosecutor, let alone my prosecutor. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure because I spent 2 years after my case avoiding anything that reminded me of that time in my life. I changed my hair, lost weight, and moved to a different part of town. I didn't read crime novels or watch legal dramas. I certainly didn't research prosecutors from the district attorney's office." Jennifer nodded, apparently satisfied. "Good, because Daniel asked me about that specifically." "What did you tell him?" "I told him I'd talk to you first." "But Amanda, I think you should know. He's not just asking about your case. He's asking about your character, your mental state during that time, your likelihood of manipulation or deception." The words hit me like cold water. "He thinks I manipulated him." I think he's trying very hard not to think that, but he's also trying to protect himself professionally. If word gets out that he's engaged to a former defendant, the charges were dropped. That doesn't matter to the press or to his political opponents. District attorneys are elected positions, Amanda. Daniel's career depends on public trust in his judgment and integrity. So what are you saying? I'm saying that from his perspective, this isn't just about your relationship. It's about his reputation, his career, possibly his entire future in public service. I felt sick. I never thought about that. Of course you didn't. You were thinking about your relationship, not his political ambitions. But Daniel has to think about both. Jennifer opened her briefcase and pulled out a thick file. "I brought copies of everything from your case, police reports, witness statements, my own notes from our meetings. I thought you might want to review them before Daniel and I talk." "Why would I want to relive that?" Quote, "Because I think there are things you've forgotten, things that might help you understand why Daniel is struggling with this situation." She handed me a document I didn't recognize. "This is my initial assessment of your case, written after our first meeting." I read my own story through Jennifer's professional lens. Client presents as a highly intelligent, articulate individual experiencing acute psychological distress following romantic relationship termination. Claims of vindictive behavior by ex-partner appear credible based on physical evidence and witness statements. Client demonstrates genuine remorse for actions and appears motivated by emotional trauma rather than criminal intent. Notable, client's primary concern during intake was not potential legal consequences, but rather disappointment in herself for becoming someone she didn't recognize. Recommend psychological evaluation to assess mental state and treatment needs. Assessment. Client represents minimal flight risk and low probability of reoffense. Strong candidate for alternative sentencing focused on rehabilitation rather than punishment. You wrote this after meeting me once? Yes. And I was right, wasn't I? You never reoffended. You completed all your community service requirements early, exceeded the therapy requirements, and by all accounts became a productive member of society. Then why does Daniel think I'm some kind of master manipulator? Jennifer's expression softened. Because he's looking at this through the lens of someone who feels betrayed. When people feel deceived, they start questioning everything, including their own judgment. She pulled out another document. This might help you understand his perspective better. It was a newspaper clipping from 6 months ago. Rising star Daniel Martinez tipped for Attorney General consideration. He's being considered for Attorney General? According to this article, he's one of the top candidates when the current AG retires next year. But that kind of position requires absolute confidence from the public and from political leaders. And being engaged to a former defendant would undermine that confidence. It could. Even if the charges were dropped, even if you were clearly rehabilitated, his opponents could use it against him. Can we trust someone whose judgment was compromised by personal feelings? That sort of thing. Quote, I stared at the article, seeing Daniel's professional headshot alongside quotes about his commitment to justice and public service. I had no idea he was being considered for something like this. Why would you? It's not exactly first date conversation material. But it explains why he's being so thorough about investigating my case. Exactly. He's not just trying to understand your past. He's trying to protect his future. Jennifer gathered her papers and stood up. I'm going to meet with Daniel tomorrow morning. Is there anything specific you want me to tell him? Tell him the truth, all of it. Amanda, the truth includes the fact that you've been deceiving him for 3 years. That's not going to be easy for him to hear, especially from your former defense attorney. Then what should I do? You should decide what matters more to you, protecting yourself or protecting your relationship with Daniel, because I don't think you can do both. After Jennifer left, I sat alone with the weight of new understanding. Daniel wasn't just hurt by my deception. He was terrified that it could destroy everything he'd worked for. Every question he'd asked, every document he'd reviewed, every moment of doubt he'd expressed wasn't just about us. It was about a career built on public trust and a future that could be shattered by the appearance of compromised judgment. I called Maya. I need you to help me with something, I said when she answered. Anything. I need you to help me figure out how to tell Daniel the truth without destroying his career. What do you mean? I explained about Jennifer's visit, about Daniel's political ambitions, about the impossible position my silence had put him in. Oh, Amanda, Maya said softly. You really didn't know? About the Attorney General thing? No. Not just that, about how much he loves his job, how much it means to him. He talks about it all the time when you're not around. The cases he's proud of, the reforms he wants to implement, the difference he thinks he can make in the system. I know he's passionate about his work. It's more than passion, it's purpose. And now he's probably wondering if loving you means sacrificing everything he's worked for. Does it? Maya was quiet for a moment. I don't know. But I think the bigger question is whether he's willing to find out. What if he's not? Then you'll know where you stand. And if he is, quote, then you'll have a chance to build something real together, something based on complete honesty instead of partial truths. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about Daniel, alone in his apartment, weighing his love for me against his dreams for his career. I thought about the man who'd shown mercy to a broken woman 4 years ago, not knowing he'd one day have to choose between that mercy and his own future. By morning, I'd made my decision. I called Jennifer before she left for her meeting with Daniel. I want to be there, I said. Amanda, I don't think that's wise. I don't care if it's wise. This is my life, my relationship, and my responsibility. If Daniel wants to investigate me, he can do it with me in the room. He might not agree to that. Then ask him. Tell him I want to answer his questions myself, without lawyers or intermediaries. Tell him I'm ready to tell him everything, including the things I should have told him years ago. There was a pause. Are you sure about this? No, but I'm sure that hiding from this conversation isn't going to solve anything. All right, I'll call him now. An hour later, Jennifer called back. He agreed to meet with both of us this afternoon at 2 o'clock at his office. How did he sound? Professional, careful, maybe a little relieved that you want to face this directly. Or maybe terrified that I'm going to make things worse. Maybe. But Amanda, whatever happens this afternoon, remember that you're not the same person who was arrested 4 years ago. You've grown, you've changed, you've built a life you can be proud of. Don't let anyone, including Daniel, make you forget that. As I hung up, I realized that Jennifer was right. I wasn't the same person who'd broken into Marcus's apartment in a fit of rage and heartbreak. But I also wasn't the same person who'd fallen in love with Daniel 3 years ago, before I understood the weight of secrets and the price of silence. This afternoon, I'd have to face the man I loved as all three versions of myself. The woman who'd made terrible mistakes, the woman who'd learned to live with those mistakes, and the woman who'd chosen love over honesty. And somehow I'd have to convince him that despite everything, those three women were all the same person. Someone worthy of the second chance he'd given her once before, and the trust he might be willing to give her again. The stakes had never been higher, and the outcome had never been less certain. But for the first time in days, I felt ready to face whatever came next. Daniel's office occupied a corner of the 5th floor of the district attorney's building, with windows overlooking the city courthouse where we'd met 3 days earlier. The afternoon sun cast sharp angles across his desk, where my case file lay open like evidence at trial. He stood when Jennifer and I entered, his posture rigid with professional formality. "Thank you both for coming," he said, gesturing to the chairs across from his desk. "I appreciate your willingness to discuss this matter. Matter. Not relationship, not situation. Matter. Like I was a case to be resolved, rather than the woman he'd planned to marry." Jennifer settled into her chair with the ease of someone accustomed to hostile conferences. I perched on the edge of mine, every muscle tense with anticipation. "Before we begin," Daniel said, opening a legal pad, "I want to establish that this conversation is being conducted in my professional capacity. I've consulted with the ethics board about potential conflicts of interest, and they've advised that a thorough review of the circumstances is warranted." The ethics board? The words escaped before I could stop them. "Amanda." Jennifer's voice carried a warning. We'd discussed this during the drive over. Let her do the talking, at least initially. "Yes," Daniel continued, his eyes fixed on his notepad rather than my face. "Given the potential implications for my career and the integrity of the district attorney's office, I felt it was necessary to seek guidance." "What kind of implications?" Jennifer asked. Daniel finally looked up, and I saw something I'd never seen in his eyes before. Fear. Not of me, but of what loving me might cost him. "The kind that could destroy everything I've worked for," he said quietly. "The kind that could make every case I've ever prosecuted vulnerable to appeal. The kind that could end my career and damage the reputation of this office." "That's a bit dramatic, don't you think?" Jennifer's tone was measured but firm. The charges against Amanda were dropped. There was no conviction, no plea agreement, no ongoing legal relationship between you after the case was closed. Except that there was an ongoing relationship. I just didn't know it. A personal relationship that began 2 years after the case was resolved, with no knowledge on either party's part of their previous connection. So Amanda claims, quote, the skepticism in his voice cut deep. I gripped the arms of my chair, fighting the urge to defend myself. "So the evidence suggests," Jennifer countered, "unless you have reason to believe otherwise." Daniel opened the file, pulling out a photograph I recognized, the newspaper clipping about his attorney general prospects. 3 weeks ago, I was interviewed by the governor's selection committee, he said. The position could be announced as early as next month. "Congratulations," Jennifer said dryly. "I'm sure Amanda is very proud of your accomplishments." "Are you?" Daniel looked directly at me for the first time since we'd sat down. Proud of my accomplishments? Or worried about what they might mean for your secret? I didn't know about the Attorney General consideration, I said, my voice barely above a whisper. But you knew about my career. You knew I was a prosecutor. You knew that my professional reputation depended on public trust in my judgment. Yes. And you knew that being engaged to a former defendant, even one whose charges were dropped, could raise questions about that judgment. I struggled for words. I thought if the charges were dropped, it wouldn't matter. It wouldn't matter? Daniel's professional composure cracked slightly. Amanda, I've spent 10 years building my reputation in this office. 10 years, proving that I can be trusted to make difficult decisions fairly and without bias. And now I have to explain to the ethics board, to the selection committee, to the press if this gets out, how I fell in love with someone whose fate I once held in my hands without recognizing her. Because she was a completely different person then, Jennifer interjected. Daniel, you've reviewed the file. You know Amanda's transformation has been remarkable. Have I? Daniel turned back to me. Because sitting here now, I'm not sure I know who Amanda really is. The woman I fell in love with was honest, direct, incapable of deception. But that woman has been lying to me for 3 years. I wasn't lying. Yes, you were. His voice rose slightly before he caught himself, glancing toward the door as if remembering we were in a government building. Every day you didn't tell me. Every conversation we had about justice and legal ethics. Every time you met my colleagues or attended office functions, you were lying. I was protecting us both. From what? From this. I gestured around his office. From you questioning everything we built together. From you wondering if I manipulated you somehow. From you having to choose between loving me and advancing your career. So you made that choice for me. I made the choice to be the person you fell in love with instead of the person I used to be. Daniel stood abruptly, walking to the window. Do you know what the worst part is? What? I defended you to the ethics board. When they suggested that my judgment might have been compromised from the beginning, I argued that it was impossible because I didn't know who you were when we met. That's true. Is it? He turned back to face me. Because I've been going over every detail of how we met, and I keep finding things that seem too convenient to be coincidental. Jennifer leaned forward. What kind of things? Sarah Martinez introduced us at her birthday party. Sarah, who works at the animal shelter where Amanda volunteers. The same animal shelter mentioned in Amanda's character references during her case. My stomach dropped. You think I planned that? I think it's suspicious that you happened to meet me through someone whose organization was used to establish your good character during your defense. Sarah was my friend in college, years before my arrest. So you say. So the records show, Jennifer said sharply. Daniel, I can provide documentation of Amanda's friendship with Sarah dating back to their undergraduate years. This conspiracy theory you're developing doesn't hold up to scrutiny. Then explain this. Daniel pulled out another document. Amanda's volunteer application for the animal shelter, dated 6 months after her case was closed. In the section asking why she wanted to volunteer, she wrote that she wanted to, quote, give back to organizations that support people in crisis. That's a normal motivation for someone who received community support during a difficult time, Jennifer said. Or it's the motivation of someone who wanted to ingratiate herself with people connected to the prosecutor's office. The animal shelter isn't connected to the prosecutor's office. Sarah Martinez is. She's married to Roberto Martinez, my cousin. The room went silent. I stared at Daniel, feeling the color drain from my face. Roberto Martinez, I repeated. My cousin, whom you've met at family gatherings, whom you've talked to about his work in victim services, whom you asked about law enforcement careers just last month. Quote, I remembered the conversation. Roberto had been talking about his work helping crime victims navigate the legal system, and I'd asked questions about how prosecutors decided which cases to pursue. I'd thought I was making polite conversation. You think I was gathering intelligence, I said. I think you've been playing a very long game. Daniel, Jennifer's voice was sharp with warning, You're making serious accusations without evidence. Am I? Let's look at the timeline. Amanda commits crimes against Marcus Morrison. I drop the charges. 2 years later, she began volunteering at an organization connected to my family. 6 months after that, she met me at a party hosted by my cousin's wife. We fall in love, get engaged, and now she's positioned to potentially become the wife of the next Attorney General. Positioned? I found my voice, anger cutting through my shock. You think I planned all of this? I think it's possible. Then you don't know me at all. No, Daniel said quietly. I don't think I do. Jennifer stood up. This meeting is over. No, it's not. I remained seated, my hands shaking with fury and hurt. Daniel, look at me. He met my eyes reluctantly. Do you really think I'm capable of orchestrating something this elaborate? Do you think I'm that calculating, that manipulative? I think people are capable of extraordinary things when their freedom or their future is at stake. My freedom wasn't at stake. The charges were dropped. Your future was. A criminal record would have followed you forever, limited your job prospects, your housing options, your ability to build the kind of life you wanted. So I seduced the prosecutor who showed me mercy? Is that your theory? I think you might have seen an opportunity and taken it. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. Then prosecute me. What? You think I committed fraud, conspiracy, maybe extortion? Then prosecute me. Open an investigation. Subpoena my records, interview my friends, trace my financial history. Prove your case. Daniel stared at me, clearly not expecting this response. But while you're building your case against me, I continued, I want you to remember something. 4 years ago, you looked at a broken woman who'd made terrible choices. And you saw someone worth saving. You saw someone who deserved a second chance. Someone who could learn from her mistakes and become better. Amanda, I want you to remember that woman because she's still here. She's standing in front of you right now, asking you to look at her the way you did then, not as a defendant or a suspect or a political liability, but as someone you once believed deserved mercy. Tears were threatening, but I forced them back. And I want you to ask yourself, what kind of prosecutor, what kind of man, what kind of person would I have to be to plan something this elaborate, this cruel, this destructive, to someone who showed me kindness? Daniel was quiet, his professional mask slipping to reveal something raw and uncertain. Because if you really believe I'm capable of that, I said, then you should absolutely end this relationship. Not because it might hurt your career, but because you deserve better than to love someone you think is a monster. The silence stretched between us, filled with the weight of accusations and defenses, of love and suspicion, of a future hanging in the balance. Finally, Daniel spoke. I don't know what to believe anymore. Then maybe, Jennifer said quietly, you should stop trying to solve this like a case and start trying to understand it like a human being. But as we left his office, I could see in Daniel's eyes that the prosecutor in him was stronger than the man who'd once loved me. He'd already made his choice, even if he wasn't ready to admit it yet. The investigation was no longer about understanding what had happened. It was about building a case for why it couldn't continue. And I was no longer his fiancé fighting for our future. I was a suspect trying to prove my innocence to a prosecutor who'd already decided I was guilty. The realization hit me as we waited for the elevator. This wasn't going to end with explanations and apologies and renewed trust. This was going to end with Daniel choosing his career over our love, and me learning that some second chances don't come with third ones. The elevator doors opened, and as we stepped inside, I caught a glimpse of Daniel through his office window. He was on the phone, and something about his posture, the way he was taking notes, told me that this conversation was far from over. The chase had begun, and I was no longer sure whether I was running toward the truth or away from it. The call came at 6:47 a.m. on a Tuesday, jarring me awake from the first decent sleep I'd managed in a week. Daniel's name on my phone screen made my heart race with equal parts hope and dread. Amanda, I need you to come to the courthouse, now. What's wrong? Just come. Bring Jennifer if you can reach her. The line went dead before I could ask more questions. Jennifer met me in the courthouse lobby 40 minutes later, both of us disheveled and running on coffee and adrenaline. We found Daniel in the same courtroom where we'd talked days earlier, but he wasn't alone. A man in an expensive suit sat at the prosecutor's table, and I recognized him immediately from newspaper photos. District Attorney Richard Brennan, Daniel's boss. "Amanda," Daniel said as we entered, "thank you for coming." "What's going on?" "Sit down, please." Brennan studied me with the calculating gaze of a man who'd spent decades sizing up defendants. "Ms. Caldwell, I'm going to be direct with you. We've received some disturbing information about your relationship with Mr. Martinez." "What kind of information?" "The kind that suggests you may have deliberately sought out a romantic relationship with the prosecutor who handled your case." Jennifer stepped forward. "On what basis are you making this accusation?" Brennan opened a folder. "Yesterday afternoon, we received a call from Marcus Morrison." The name hit me like a physical blow. "Marcus?" "Your former boyfriend. The victim in your criminal case." Brennan's voice was flat, professional. "He claims that you contacted him 6 months ago, asking detailed questions about your case, and specifically about the prosecutor who'd handled it." "That's not true." "He says you met him for coffee, that you seemed interested in reconnecting, but that the conversation quickly turned to legal matters. According to him, you asked whether he remembered the name of the prosecutor, whether he'd been satisfied with how the case was handled, whether he thought the decision to drop charges was appropriate." I felt the room spinning. "I never contacted Marcus. I haven't spoken to him since the case was closed." "He has text messages, Ms. Caldwell. Screenshots of conversations where you're asking to meet, discussing closure and moving forward." "That's impossible." Brennan slid a phone across the table. The screen showed a text conversation between my number and a number I didn't recognize. The messages made my blood run cold. "Amanda, hi Marcus, I know this is unexpected, but I've been thinking about what happened between us and I'd like to talk if you're open to it." "Marcus, not sure that's a good idea." "Amanda, I understand your hesitation. I just feel like there are things we never resolved, and I'm in a different place now. Could we meet for coffee, just to talk?" "Marcus, what kind of things?" "Amanda, the legal stuff mostly. I've been wondering about the prosecutor who handled my case. Do you remember his name?" The conversation continued, with Amanda asking increasingly specific questions about Daniel, his reputation, his career trajectory, his personal life. "I didn't send these messages," I said, my voice barely audible. "The texts came from your phone number," Brennan replied. "Then someone else sent them. Someone with access to my number or someone who spoofed it." "Ms. Caldwell?" Brennan's tone suggested he'd heard this defense before. "Are you seriously claiming that someone impersonated you in order to, what, frame you for seeking information about your own case?" "I'm claiming that I didn't send these messages because I would never voluntarily contact Marcus Morrison about anything, let alone about Daniel." Jennifer was studying the phone screen. "When were these messages sent?" "Over a period of 3 weeks, starting in early October." "October," Jennifer repeated. "Amanda, where were you in early October?" I tried to remember. October felt like a lifetime ago. I was planning our engagement party. Daniel and I were looking at venues, sending invitations." "So you were actively planning a future with Daniel while simultaneously investigating his connection to your case?" "No. I was planning our engagement party because I love him and wanted to marry him." Brennan closed the folder. "Ms. Caldwell, based on this evidence and other factors that have come to light, we're recommending that the Attorney General's office conduct a formal investigation into potential ethics violations by Mr. Martinez." "What?" Daniel spoke for the first time since we'd arrived. "Richard, we discussed this. We discussed your cooperation with a preliminary inquiry. But, given the new evidence, this has escalated beyond what we can handle internally." "What new evidence?" Jennifer demanded. Brennan hesitated, then pulled out another document. Financial records. 3 large cash deposits to Ms. Caldwell's checking account over the past 6 months, each made shortly before significant developments in Mr. Martinez's career. I stared at the banking statement. The deposits were real, but I'd never seen them before. "Those aren't mine," I whispered. "They're in your account, from your account number." "Then someone else made them. Someone else has access to my account." "Ms. Caldwell, you're asking us to believe that someone orchestrated an elaborate scheme to frame you for manipulating Mr. Martinez, complete with fake text messages and planted bank deposits. Do you understand how that sounds?" It sounds insane, I admitted, but it's the only explanation that makes sense because I didn't do any of this. Daniel was staring at the banking statement like it was written in a foreign language. Amanda, these deposits, they're significant amounts. Where would money like this come from? I don't know. I don't know anything about these deposits or these messages or any of this. The timing is particularly concerning, Brennan continued. The first deposit was made 2 days before the governor announced he was considering Mr. Martinez for Attorney General. The second came the day after his interview with the selection committee. The third was last week, just before the ethics board meeting. It's too convenient, Jennifer said suddenly. Everyone turned to look at her. It's too convenient, she repeated. The timing, the amounts, the messages. If Amanda were really running some kind of long-term manipulation scheme, she'd be more subtle about it. These deposits are large enough to attract attention, the messages are too direct, and the timeline is too obvious. What are you suggesting? Brennan asked. I'm suggesting that someone wants Amanda to look guilty. Someone who knew about her relationship with Daniel, knew about the potential Attorney General appointment, and knew how to make her appear to be a manipulative fraud. Who would do that? Jennifer looked at Daniel. Who benefits if Daniel's nomination is derailed? Who gains if his reputation is destroyed? Daniel's face went pale. You think this is political? I think someone did their research and found the perfect weapon to use against you. A former defendant with a secret relationship to the prosecutor. All they had to do was manufacture evidence of manipulation. Brennan was skeptical. That's a serious accusation, Ms. Walsh. It's a serious situation, Mr. Brennan. And if I'm right, then you're about to destroy 2 innocent people based on fabricated evidence. How do we prove that? Daniel asked. Jennifer smiled grimly. We do what prosecutors do. We will investigate. Quote. The next 4 hours passed in a blur of phone calls, document requests, and digital forensics. Jennifer had connections throughout the legal community, and she used every one of them to fast-track what would normally take weeks of investigation. The breakthrough came from an unexpected source, Maya. Amanda, she said when I called her for emotional support, those text messages you mentioned? The ones from Marcus? What about them? I think I know who sent them. What do you mean? Remember when you had that stalker last year? The guy from your college who wouldn't stop calling you? Kevin Patterson, yeah, but that was resolved. What if it wasn't? What if he's been monitoring you this whole time, and when he found out about Daniel, he saw an opportunity to destroy your relationship? Maya, that's crazy, or exactly the kind of thing Kevin would do. Remember, he worked in IT. He'd know how to spoof phone numbers, hack bank accounts, create digital evidence. I felt something click into place. Oh my God. What? The engagement party invitations. Kevin's name was on our guest list from college friends. He would have known about Daniel's job, his prospects, everything. I immediately called Jennifer, who was at the courthouse working with a cybersecurity expert. Can you trace the source of those text messages? I asked. We're trying, but whoever sent them used sophisticated spoofing software. However, if you're right about this Kevin Patterson, we might be able to find other evidence. What kind of evidence? Bank security footage from the locations where those deposits were made. If Patterson made them in person, we'll have him on camera. 2 hours later, Jennifer called back. We found him. Kevin Patterson, captured on security footage at 3 different bank branches, making cash deposits to your account using forged deposit slips with your information. So he was framing me. Elaborately. And there's more. The cyber forensics team traced the spoofed text messages to a computer registered to Patterson. They also found evidence that he'd been monitoring your social media, your email, even your credit reports. For how long? At least 2 years. Amanda, this man has been stalking you digitally, learning about your life, waiting for the perfect opportunity to destroy it. But why target Daniel specifically? Because Daniel represents everything Patterson could never be. Successful, respected, loved by you. Destroying Daniel would destroy your happiness, which seems to have been his ultimate goal. That evening, Daniel and I sat in his apartment while prosecutors executed search warrants on Kevin Patterson's home and computers. The charges against me had been dropped. the ethics investigation suspended, and Daniel's attorney general nomination was back on track. But the damage to our relationship felt irreversible. "I'm sorry," Daniel said finally. "I'm sorry I didn't believe you. Sorry I treated you like a suspect. Sorry I let my career fears override my love for you. I'm sorry too. Sorry I didn't tell you about my past sooner. Sorry I let my fear of losing you create the very situation I was trying to avoid." Where does that leave us? I looked around his apartment, at the life we'd built together, at the engagement ring I'd continued wearing throughout this nightmare. I don't know. Do you still want to marry someone with a criminal past? Someone who comes with complications and ethical concerns and potential political liabilities? Daniel was quiet for a long moment. The woman I fell in love with was honest, brave, and committed to being better than her worst moments. The woman who challenged me to prosecute her if I thought she was guilty, who stood up to accusations and suspicion with dignity, who faced down her worst nightmare to protect our relationship. That woman is everything I thought she was and more. Even knowing what you know now? Especially knowing what I know now. He reached for my hand. "Amanda, 4 years ago I gave you a second chance because I believed you deserved it. Today I'm asking if you'll give me one." "What do you mean?" "I mean I want to marry you, not despite your past, but because of who it helped you become. I want to build a life with someone who understands that good people can make terrible mistakes and still be worthy of love. And your career? Will survive. And if it doesn't, then I'll build a new one with someone who's shown me that second chances are worth the risk." 6 months later, I stood in a small church surrounded by friends and family, including Sarah Martinez, whose introduction at that birthday party had started this whole complicated journey. Jennifer Walsh sat in the front row, having become an unexpected friend through our shared crisis. Even Maya cried, which she insisted was just allergies. Kevin Patterson was serving 18 months for stalking, fraud, and identity theft. Marcus Morrison had issued a public apology for his role in the deception, explaining that Patterson had manipulated him into believing I was genuinely trying to reconnect. During his Attorney General confirmation hearings, Daniel was asked about his relationship with a former defendant. His answer was simple. Sometimes the measure of justice isn't punishment, but the chance for redemption. I'm proud to marry someone who exemplifies the possibility of positive change. He was confirmed unanimously. As we exchanged vows, I thought about the woman who'd broken into an apartment 4 years earlier, destroyed by heartbreak and poor judgment. I thought about the prosecutor who'd seen something worth saving in that broken woman. And I thought about the couple we'd become, imperfect people who'd learned that love isn't about having a perfect past, but about building an honest future together. Do you, Amanda Catherine Caldwell, take Daniel Martinez to be your husband? I looked into the eyes of the man who'd given me a second chance twice, who'd chosen love over career advancement, who'd learned to trust his heart as much as his professional instincts. I do. And for the first time in years, I felt like the name Amanda Catherine Caldwell belonged to someone I could be proud to be. In the end, we'd learned that some secrets are too dangerous to keep, some accusations too serious to ignore, and some love too strong to be destroyed by either. We discovered that justice isn't always about punishment, that mercy isn't always about forgiveness, and that sometimes the person who needs a second chance most is the one brave enough to offer it. Our story began with a criminal case and a prosecutor's decision. It continued with love built on incomplete truths and nearly ended with suspicion and fear. But it concluded with something neither of us had expected. The understanding that the strongest relationships aren't built on perfect people making perfect choices, but on imperfect people choosing each other, again and again, despite everything that tries to tear them apart. The woman who'd once been case number 2019-4587 was now Mrs. Amanda Martinez, wife of the Attorney General, advocate for criminal justice reform, and living proof that everyone deserves the chance to write a better ending to their story. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, you get to write that ending with the person who believed you deserved it from the very beginning. Looking for more? We've got 2 amazing stories ready for you right on screen. If this one touched you, these are absolutely worth your time. Click to watch them now. And hey, subscribe and hit that bell to never miss our latest uploads.